Karen laughed at the disabled girl, thinking she was no match for the system, until the girl's fight for justice turned everything around. The courtroom was tense as the mother and her disabled daughter entered, both feeling the weight of the world on their shoulders. The daughter, confined to a wheelchair, had always been underestimated by those around her. Today, however, was different. They had come to fight for her grandmother's home, which was now at risk due to a corporate foreclosure. The mother, trying to stay strong, gripped her daughter's hand, knowing this battle wouldn't be easy. On the opposite side sat Karen, a corporate lawyer, exuding confidence. She looked at the mother and daughter with a dismissive smile, clearly believing that they didn't stand a chance. She had seen many cases like this, small people with no real power trying to fight the system. It was a game for her, something she had mastered. The court seemed to echo her confidence as everyone awaited the start of the hearing. But the underestimation was palpable. The moment the mother and daughter spoke up, the courtroom seemed to laugh, dismissing them as easy targets. The daughter's disability only made it worse. No one took them seriously, and that fact hurt more than anything. They were already fighting a losing battle, or so it seemed. But what no one knew was that this was just the beginning of a fight that would change everything. Karen couldn't hide the smirk on her face as she glanced over at the disabled daughter. "You're representing yourself?" she said with a laugh, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "This will be over in minutes." She leaned back in her chair, confident that this would be an easy win. To her, the idea that someone like this girl, who didn't even have a lawyer, could challenge a powerful corporation was laughable. The rest of the courtroom seemed to share her belief. Eyes rolled, whispers spread, and a few chuckles echoed around the room. The mother looked at her daughter, worry in her eyes, but the daughter's expression remained calm. Despite the mocking atmosphere, she didn't show fear or hesitation. She had prepared for this moment, studying every law, every case that might help her fight back. But the looks she received made it clear, no one expected her to succeed. Karen wasn't the only one who underestimated the daughter. The whole room seemed to be against her. Some sneered, others whispered, all of them thinking that this case was already won. The judge looked at her with a hint of disbelief, and even the opposing lawyer barely spared her a second glance. They all thought they had already won. It was as if they couldn't see her for who she really was, a woman with a burning desire to protect what was rightfully hers. But what they didn't understand was that the daughter wasn't there to make an easy concession. She wasn't going to back down just because they dismissed her. They underestimated her, and that mistake would be the biggest one they'd ever make. The courtroom wasn't ready for what was about to unfold. Despite the ridicule and the mocking glances from the courtroom, the disabled daughter remained calm. She didn't let the whispers or the laughter shake her. Her hands, resting on the arms of her wheelchair, were steady, and her eyes focused forward with determination. The sneers of Karen and the dismissive attitude from the judge didn't faze her. She had a mission, and nothing was going to stop her from fulfilling it. The mother, sitting beside her, was filled with worry, but she knew her daughter well. The girl had always been strong. Even when people thought she couldn't do things because of her disability, she had proven them wrong over and over. Today was no different. The daughter had prepared tirelessly for this moment. She had spent hours studying the law, researching every detail of the case, knowing that the best way to fight back was with knowledge and unwavering resolve. She wasn't going to let anyone treat her like a fool, no matter how hard they tried. When the time came for her to speak, the courtroom fell silent. She cleared her throat, her voice steady but full of quiet confidence. As she stood up, her movements slow but determined, every eye in the room was on her. For a moment, the doubt in the air seemed to hang heavier, but she didn't falter. She had nothing to prove to anyone except herself. She wasn't here to play by their rules. She was here to fight for what was rightfully hers. She wasn't going to back down. She wasn't going to let them win simply because they believed she didn't belong in this fight. Her determination shone through as she presented her case with clarity, without fear. She knew that her fight wasn't just about a house. It was about standing up to a system that overlooked people like her. The courtroom might have underestimated her, but she wasn't going to let that stop her from doing what was right. The daughter's voice echoed through the courtroom as she began to speak, her words clear and precise. Even though everyone had doubted her, she had come prepared. 4 months, she had studied every document, every legal term, and every rule she could find related to her grandmother's case. She wasn't just there to argue, she was there to win. With a calm but steady hand, she reached into her folder and pulled out a document. She didn't hesitate as she walked up to the judge, handing him the papers with a quiet confidence. "Your Honor," she began, "I have found something that changes everything." She could feel the eyes of the courtroom on her, and she took a deep breath before continuing. The judge scanned the papers as she explained. These are two versions of the same mortgage document. One was filed at the start of the foreclosure process, and the other was filed later. If you look closely, you'll see that the signatures don't match. The room went silent. The opposing lawyer, Karen, frowned, but the daughter didn't stop. She pointed to the documents, her voice steady as she added, "The second signature isn't my grandmother's. It was forged." The courtroom was in shock. The judge leaned in closer, looking at the documents in disbelief. The daughter went on, explaining how she had discovered that the documents had been altered after her grandmother had been hospitalized for a stroke. This wasn't just a mistake, it was fraud. With this one crucial piece of evidence, everything changed. The daughter had exposed a legal flaw that no one had seen before. The once confident Karen was now silent, realizing the case wasn't as simple as she had thought. The daughter wasn't just defending her grandmother's home, she was revealing the truth that no one wanted to see. The moment the daughter revealed the forged signatures, the entire courtroom went silent. Karen's confident smile quickly faded as the judge examined the documents. The room was filled with tension, and for the first time, Karen looked uncertain. She had expected an easy victory, but now everything was on the line. The daughter's calm, unwavering voice filled the silence. "The documents were altered after my grandmother was hospitalized. These forgeries were used to take her home." Her words echoed through the room, and Karen could feel her grip on the case slipping away. Karen stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. She tried to regain her composure, but it was too late. Her earlier smugness had disappeared, replaced by confusion and doubt. She had built her entire case on the idea that the daughter was an easy target, someone who wouldn't be able to fight back. Now she was being forced to face the truth. The daughter wasn't just a victim, she was a force to be reckoned with. Karen glanced at the judge, then back at the daughter, her arrogance slowly crumbling. She knew she had to do something to take control, but she couldn't. The evidence was right there, and the courtroom knew it. The daughter had turned the tables in an instant, shifting the power from Karen to herself. The daughter's quiet confidence had shattered Karen's facade. And now it was clear, the fight for justice had only just begun. The daughter stood tall, her eyes never leaving the judge. With a calm but firm voice, she requested, "Your Honor, I would like to request further discovery in this case. I believe the opposing side is hiding something." The courtroom fell silent as everyone processed her words. Karen, the opposing lawyer, looked visibly uncomfortable. She had been so sure of her victory that she hadn't anticipated this move. The daughter's request was not just a formality, it was a bold step that showed she wasn't backing down. She wasn't relying on luck or the hopes of winning by chance. She was fighting with every legal tool at her disposal. The judge raised an eyebrow but nodded, giving the daughter permission to proceed. Karen's face tightened with frustration. The daughter had just forced her hand, and now the opposition was being pushed into a corner. The more the daughter insisted on following the legal process, the more Karen's case started to unravel. The courtroom, which had once dismissed the daughter as an easy target, now began to look at her with a new respect. She was self-represented, yet she knew the law better than anyone had imagined. Karen, who had been so confident just moments ago, now seemed unsure. Her once unshakable stance was becoming weak, and the case was starting to slip away from her. The judge, who had initially doubted the daughter, now took her seriously. He listened carefully as she laid out her legal reasoning and demanded the truth. Karen had underestimated the daughter, but now the tables had turned. The daughter wasn't just fighting for her grandmother's home, she was proving that even without a lawyer she could expose the flaws in a seemingly perfect case. At first, the judge had been skeptical. When the disabled daughter walked into the courtroom, representing herself without a lawyer, he had thought this would be an easy case. He had expected the opposition to win quickly, and he had even been amused by the idea of her challenging a corporate lawyer without professional help. But as the hearing went on, something started to change. The judge couldn't ignore the evidence she was presenting and the way she held her ground. At first, he had dismissed her, not believing that someone like her, disabled and without legal experience, could have a real chance. But with each piece of evidence she presented, with each argument she made, the judge began to realize that she wasn't just a young woman in a wheelchair. She was someone who had put in the hard work and research, someone who understood the law better than anyone had thought. The courtroom had started to shift too. The confidence in Karen's face, which had once been so strong, was now gone. Karen had underestimated the daughter and her ability to challenge the system. But the daughter's persistence was her greatest strength. She had stayed calm, focused, and determined throughout the entire process. She knew she was right, and that belief drove her forward. With the final pieces of evidence in place, the daughter made her final statement. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, "the documents I've shown today prove that the foreclosure on my grandmother's home was based on fraud. These signatures were forged and the procedure was never followed correctly. I've asked for discovery, I've followed every legal step, and now it's clear, this was wrong." The judge sat back looking at the evidence one last time. He had heard Karen's defense, but it was clear now that there were too many holes in the case. The documents didn't add up, and the opposing lawyer had no way of explaining the discrepancies. The corporate giant that had tried to take the home from the daughter couldn't justify their actions. Finally, after a long silence, the judge spoke. His voice was no longer filled with skepticism or amusement. It was serious, measured. "The court rules in favor of the defendant," he said, looking directly at the disabled daughter. "The foreclosure is void. The property must be returned immediately." A wave of relief and triumph washed over the daughter. Her mother, sitting beside her, couldn't hold back her tears. They had won. Against all odds, against a powerful system, they had won. The home was safe, and the daughter had proven that determination and knowledge could defeat even the most formidable opponents. As the courtroom began to empty, Karen sat quietly, defeated. She had thought this case would be easy, but the daughter had turned the tables completely. The courtroom that had once laughed and dismissed her was now silent, filled with respect for the young woman who had fought for what was right. The daughter's persistence and legal knowledge had won the day. Her fight wasn't just for her grandmother's home, it was for justice, for fairness, and for the belief that no one should be underestimated. She had shown that even someone who is written off as weak or powerless can change the game with determination and courage. The lesson from this story is powerful and clear. Never underestimate someone just because they seem to be at a disadvantage. The disabled daughter, who walked into the courtroom with no legal background and was dismissed by everyone, proved that determination, knowledge, and courage can overcome even the toughest obstacles. She wasn't expected to win, and yet, through her hard work and refusal to back down, she managed to expose fraud and secure justice for her and her family. At the beginning of the case, no one thought she stood a chance. Karen, the corporate lawyer, had believed this would be an easy win. The courtroom, including the judge, looked at the daughter with doubt. They saw her disability and her lack of legal training and assumed she wouldn't be able to put up a fight. But the daughter had something stronger than experience on her side. She had a purpose and a drive to protect what was rightfully hers. She studied the law, gathered evidence, and came prepared. She didn't let her disability define her. She let her actions speak louder than any judgment others made. As the case progressed, Karen's confidence began to crumble. The daughter's quiet but firm confidence and legal savvy started to change the tide. The courtroom, which had once doubted her, began to respect her. And by the end, the judge, who had been amused at the idea of her representing herself, couldn't ignore the truth she had uncovered. Her persistence had paid off, and the corporate giant that had thought it could easily take her grandmother's home had been exposed for its wrongdoing. Karen, who had thought the case was a sure win, was left stunned and defeated. She had underestimated the daughter's abilities and strength. The courtroom, once filled with laughter and disbelief, now sat in silence, reflecting on what had just happened. The daughter had shown them all that it wasn't about having the best lawyer or the most money. It was about standing up for what's right, even when everyone tells you it's impossible. The daughter's victory was more than just a legal win. It was a lesson for everyone in that room. It was a reminder that sometimes, the underdog has the most to prove. And when given the chance, those who refuse to back down can change everything. The courtroom had learned a valuable lesson that day. Never underestimate someone, because sometimes the greatest strength lies in the most unlikely places. In the end, this story is a powerful reminder of the impact of standing up to injustice. The disabled daughter showed everyone that no matter how hard the fight, standing up for what's right can make all the difference. Even when the odds were stacked against her, even when the courtroom laughed and dismissed her, she refused to back down. Her determination, knowledge, and courage led her to victory. Her story teaches us that we all have the power to change things, no matter our circumstances. Sometimes, the biggest battles are the ones that seem impossible. But when we have the courage to fight, when we believe in ourselves, we can break through the toughest barriers. The daughter's success wasn't just about winning a case. It was about standing tall, believing in justice, and showing others that no one is truly powerless. If you ever find yourself facing a challenge that feels too big, remember this story. Keep fighting for what's right even if no one believes you can win. Your voice, your actions, and your belief in justice have the power to change everything. Never give up. The fight for justice is always worth it,